The Carleton Center for Public History is a designated Carleton University research center which encourages, promotes, and facilitates the study of public history, cultural memory, and historical consciousness. The CCPH Alumni Interview Project invites current public history graduate students at Carleton to develop relationships with program alumni and showcases the talent, diversity, and achievements of Carleton's public history program. For more information, please visit ccph.carleton.ca. Hi everyone, this is Meghan Lundrigan. I'm here conducting an interview for the Carleton Center for Public History. I'm here with Joel Lagasse. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a second year public history student at Carleton University. Actually, I'm just coming to an end of that program. I handed everything in last week, so it's very exciting. I'm also the research assistant for the Carleton Center for Public History, and I've helped to kind of organize this broader interview project. So welcome, Joel. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a graduate of the public history program at Carleton in 2005. I was a member of the very first class of the public history department, public history program. And at the moment I'm studying Japanese history, doing my PhD at University of Victoria.
Cool. I'm actually starting my PhD at Carleton in the fall, so I feel like we'll have lots to talk about.
Definitely.
So can I ask you, how did you become interested in public history?
Well, I guess it was quite natural. I grew up in Port Royal in Nova Scotia, and
Right on.
we lived in the old Baptist parsonage, which was only about a kilometer or so away from the habitation, which was the original, or I guess the second habitation set up by Samuel de Champlain and Sieur de Monts in 1604. So that sort of sense of history was instilled in me in a very, very early age.
Excellent. I grew up in Cape Breton, actually, in Sydney. So.
Oh, really? Huh.
That's kind of funny. So what did your MRE focus on? I guess at that point it was a thesis still, right? You guys did a 150-page long thing? No,
we did the master's research paper.
Okay.
But it was, I guess mine came in at about 110 or so pages, but it was mostly photographs. There were a lot of photographs. I did the representation of the Mi'kmaq people in photography, and sort of comparing the photographic representation with representations of the Mi'kmaq in tourism literature in the early 20th century.
Interesting. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I find one of the great things I find about the program is that we're all able to kind of fuel and maintain these really diverse research questions. So other than that, what do you think that Carleton and the public history program was able to provide you that made it unique from other MA programs?
Well, I guess it was at the time, in sort of 2003, 2004, Jim Opp had just been hired as an assistant professor.
Oh, yeah.
And he had just gotten into photography and looking at photography and representation through photography very seriously. And I had sort of discovered photography on my own at about the same time. So it was quite fortunate that he was there just as I started developing an interest in photography. But I think just being in Ottawa, now that I'm way out on the West Coast, just the amount of resources that are available in Ottawa, just being able to go down to the National Archives on a whim and start digging through boxes is, I really do miss that.
Yeah, I'd say. That's really cool. I actually just handed in my photography paper for Jim yesterday.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, so it's still being taught.
Yeah, that's good.
Every second year. It's a great course.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you mentioned that you're doing your PhD are you at UVic right now?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. So what is your PhD research focusing on? And do you think that the the public history MA program, like, adequately prepared you for that?
Definitely. There some, I guess, sort of the theoretical and methodological issues that are at the core of my master's research paper are at the core of my dissertation. I'm
Mm.
looking at the colonization of Hokkaido, which is the northernmost of Japan's four main islands,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at sort of the late 19th century into the early 20th century. And I'm looking at a lot of the same questions of representation and colonization and decolonization, um, but expanding from photography to look at information more broadly and however information is encoded into material media. Photography, I'm looking at some photograph collections, but also through diaries and sort of the normal historical materials, and then also looking at some other things like paintings and oral histories, and sort of the oral epics of the indigenous Ainu people in particular.
That's really interesting. How did you get into Japanese history? It's not something I don't know a whole bunch about it, so.
Well, after I finished my MA, me and my partner took off to Japan for a couple of years,
Mm.
and just by luck, we got jobs teaching English in Asahikawa in Hokkaido,
Oh,
and
cool.
just living there, it became apparent to me quite quickly that the historical experience of colonization and
Mm.
also the experience of settler territory was very similar to the history that I had studied at Carleton. So
Cool.
it got me interested, and as my language abilities improved, I started to read books and to study more deeply into this history, and that's what got me into what I'm doing now.
Awesome. What year of your PhD are you in?
I'm in my fourth year now, so I've got everything done except for the dissertation.
Oh, yes. And how is that coming along?
Well, it's a slow process, but I
Yeah,
am making progress. Uh,
that's great to hear. It's good. So, as a PhD student, what do you find? Well, I guess PhD is different than the MA, but what do you find is your favorite aspect of the PhD? And what part do you find most challenging, if that differs from the MA
mhm.
program?
Well, I think the big thing for the PhD was making the transition to from sort of TAing and helping with teaching and sort of doing localized presentations with classmates or in sort of smaller venues to doing stuff on in bigger venues and actually teaching my own courses. So I've had a chance now to teach a summer course at UVic, and I've also had opportunity to travel to China to present a paper, and I presented papers at other places, and
Mm.
sort of just getting access to that larger pool of uh, academic feedback and expertise is really very valuable. That sort of, for me anyway, it came open as I entered the PhD program, and I wasn't even really aware of how big it could get as an MA
Yeah,
student.
cool. What course? What was your course about?
I did a course on technology in modern Asia.
Oh, cool.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. I study a lot. I study new media, and my MRE focused on historical representations through YouTube. So I'm really
Oh,
interested in
interesting.
that.
Huh.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird project, but it was a lot of fun. So
That does sound really fun.
yeah. So what do you find most challenging about what you're doing now?
Well, I guess I'm kind of in a weird position because in the time between when I finished my MA and um, I started my PhD, I started a sort of side career doing web development and website design.
Mm,
So now in my
mm,
PhD, I'm trying to put those two skills together. So I'm
yeah.
luckily at UVic, we have a really active digital humanities community. So I'm sort of plugged into that.
Hmm.
But the challenge for me is putting these two very disparate skill sets together, and so doing something that's satisfying to me and that is creative for me, so I can use sort of my scholarly skills as well as my technical skills to make
Hmm.
something, but to make something that is that will meet the standards of the sort of um, the academic credential system. So
Hmm.
it's the old.
Well, and it's challenging too, right? Because
Mhm.
when you tell people that you're really interested in like marrying technology with like history, which people find really different. They think you're kind of weird. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So cool. Okay. Well, is your PhD still focused in public history related issues? And if so, are there any specifically that you kind of grapple with day to day?
I guess it's sort of along the same lines, is that I'm trying to use internet technology and web technologies to present the history in different ways. So, for example, one of the sort of chapters that I have in mind is taking a document and crowdsourcing the translation of the document. So, developing a sort of website interface that would allow me to sort of do the hard, difficult work of the translation myself, but then crowdsource sort of the review process and the editing process of the translation. So I guess that to me is sort of public history, because it's not just publishing a book and then sending it off and then waiting for people to write reviews. It's actually engaging with people and bringing the documents and the actual real work of history into a more public forum.
Yeah, and I find like engaging with the public is one of the most important aspects of public history. So it's not just focused on the ivory tower and, a bunch of people sitting in a room reading something that'll never kind of open that process up to the wider public. So, yeah. Do you volunteer with any organizations?
I haven't lately in the last couple of years, but I have made websites for a community newspaper here in Victoria. But I have been busy with my PhD, and then we had a daughter.
Yes.
We had a baby.
Oh, congratulations.
About a year and a few months ago, so I don't have a lot of spare time.
Well, that is fair. That is. Okay, well, is there any advice you can offer to current and prospective public history students, or possibly potential PhDs, such as myself, about making the jump from the MA to the PhD, or making the jump to public history?
Well, I think that in my experience in academia, is that a lot of the programs and a lot of the coursework is focused on developing a really deep expertise in one area. But for public history, and I think even in sort of more traditional academic careers now more than ever, what's really useful is a very wide set of flexible skills that you can apply in a lot of different contexts. So unfortunately, if you go into a PhD program, you have to spend a lot of time sort of developing those skill sets outside of your coursework.
Yeah.
So the way I've done it is just sort of do it in little bits and pieces and start with what's interesting to you. Like, for me, I like playing with HTML and CSS code and working with JavaScript. So I just sort of do that in the spare time that I have. And over time, it adds up to actually skills that are marketable. But yeah, so I think it's just sort of being aware that the value, I think, of a public historian is being able to bring a lot of different skills and a lot of different knowledge to bear, not just sort of one really deep area of expertise in one limited area.
Cool. Okay. Couple more questions then. So I'm curious to know, I know one of the major aspects of the program is the internship component. And I'm wondering where you interned and whether or not you found that experience helpful, enjoyable, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was at the Science and Technology Museum in
Oh,
Ottawa.
brilliant.
Yeah, and so I had a chance to work with the Canadian National Railways photography collection.
Oh, cool.
And I had a really good internship. They're really good people. All the curators are really great. And that collection is just fascinating. It's like a million photographs taken sort of mid 19th century all the way up to 2005 when the collection was donated to the museum. So I had 4 months just to look at pictures and sort of write a research review of or a research guide to the collection. And I found it really valuable because at the same time I was writing my research paper on photographs and photographic collections. So I found it very valuable and very, very worthwhile.
Cool. It was really neat, actually. I was in one of the museums courses last semester, and we got to go on a tour of the warehouses that house a lot of their trains, which is so crazy to think about. So that was pretty neat to see some old wooden ones.
They've got so many cool toys in those warehouses.
Oh.
It's just fascinating.
It's crazy, and they have like a crazy amount of storage space, like considering, right? But then it's nuts that they're still running out of space, of course, because their artifacts are so like giant. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so for our last question, it's kind of a fun one. So you said you're very busy, obviously. You've been finishing your PhD. But what is your favorite kind of unique representation of history that you've seen most recently? It can be anything, film, TV. One of our other interviewees said that he is really fascinated by the Settlers of Catan board game.
Well, this isn't one that I've seen recently, but the sort of I guess the standard for public history for me has always been the Fortress Louisbourg. I went there when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and it just floored me how impressive it was. It was just like for a kid of 10 or 9 or 10, it was like actually time traveling and going back to the to Louisbourg at that time in the late 18th century with actors acting out parts, and you could actually, I remember going through the barracks, and there were actors there sort of living like doing things that soldiers would have done in the barracks. And it's just for me, that's sort of the gold standard of public history, to be able to create such a very powerful immersive environment where people can actually engage with the past very directly.
Yeah, I love the Fortress as well, and I actually wrote about it in my my application to the program because my partner grew up in Lewisburg, and all of our friends, like I went to high school in Sydney, so all of our friends had summer jobs like working as interpreters. So it was always a really cool place to go in the summer, and it's so interactive, like you can touch everything, which is so different from every other museum I'd ever been to. Like you're allowed to pick up the cannonballs, and you can like buy the bread, and it's just it's like the coolest place ever. So Lewisburg's foggy though, so you have to kind of like bring sweaters and things. And this year it's actually their 300th anniversary of the founding of the fortress.
Oh, really?
So,
wow.
Yeah, they have like all these crazy activities happening. Like I think Joel Plaskett's going to perform on the waterfront, and you know they're going to have like historically recreated like banquets and things like that. So it looks pretty cool. Pretty cool. Do you have anything else to add on your experience at Carleton? Favorite parts of the program, fond memories?
Well, I guess I should mention that the best part of the program was my fellow students. There were 3 of us in that first class of the public history program, and I think we all got along really well, and we took pretty well all the same courses together. And then the others in the regular MA stream. I think that's the real value of the program, is being able to bring together really interesting grad students that have interesting outlooks on life and interesting projects. And that's what I found. Yeah.
And everyone's so supportive, I find. Like all of the faculty and all of like our cohort, everyone just loves what everyone else is doing, and get all these emails, people who like find things to send you, and it's so nice to be in an environment where everyone's like invested in your success. It's like, yeah, I never thought grad school would be that supportive. You know, you always hear horror stories.
Yeah, well, I think it's something you have to work at. It doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to thank you, Joel, for taking the time to Skype with me long distance so we could record this interview. It's been great chatting with you. And yeah, so we'll say goodbye to all of our listeners, whatever time of the day they're listening. Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure.